All the cool kids had Game Boys, and so did I. Unfortunately, they were mutually exclusive. Pokemon was my first foray into games, but a couple years later, I got my very own copy of Link's Awakening DX. It was great, and I loved it. Unfortunately, I did what every adult regrets from their childhood. I gave it away. It was July 30th, 2001. It was my cousin Kyle, you see. He never had a Game Boy. He didn't even know what a Pokemon's was, and I, on the other hand, had just acquired my very own new Game Boy Advance and Pokemon Crystal the day after it released. I just wanted to share the joy that Game Boys had passed on to me with my younger cousin. Show him what it really meant to be alive. Well, I decided to give him my old Game Boy Color and Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Trading Card Game and Zelda Oracle of Seasons and probably a bunch of other weird games I got for Christmas at some point. And well, I gave him Link's Awakening. My mom, well, she asked me, "Are you sure, honey?" And I replied to her, confident as ever, "Oh, I'm sure," knowing one day maybe I'd see these games and this Game Boy Color again. But then Kyle's family moved to Australia, and I didn't see them for 9 years. But hey, hopefully it was as formative for him as it was for me, and we laughed about it a couple years ago when I finally figured out that that's where my Game Boy and all my Game Boy games went. But all that obviously begs the question, what can Link's Awakening do to warrant the likely $60 price tag? Let's talk about it. This year, we're seeing a lot of Nintendo's primarily handheld franchises move over from the handheld counterparts to the hybrid home console thing that is the Switch. So Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, sort of Luigi's Mansion recently, and of course, top-down Zelda. These will all almost undoubtedly cost the full $60 of a regular Switch game, but some of them have more obvious reasons to warrant the $20 price jump than some other ones. I already know that fanatixfour's own Justin remains quite underwhelmed at the concept. You should talk to him about it on Discord. More about that later. Furthermore, this generation has seen the most remakes and remasters pretty much ever, so it's not all that surprising to see it done with Link's Awakening, even though Link's Awakening was kind of a surprising choice. However, they're all handled a little differently, and some of them are more obviously worth their price tag than others. Here's a couple examples of what I'm talking about. Spyro Reignited and Crash Insane Trilogy are new graphic takes on the exact same content from the original games. However, these are both 3 game bundles for $40 each. It's a deal no matter how you look at it. Dark Souls Remaster, on the other hand, is just a remaster, but costs $40 on the Switch. And this didn't feel too bad because it's a fairly sprawling, expansive game, even if it's not everyone's cup of tea. Lastly, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is an incredibly similar situation to Link's Awakening. They're both grid-for-grid remakes of their respective original Game Boy titles. Pokemon Let's Go was $60 and generally warranted its price tag because of all the different features it offered, although many didn't want those in the first place. Let's Go definitely had a lot of work put into it and was a full experience game, but still had a lot of backlash for being a full-price title. So that made me wonder, as we'll likely be seeing it at E3 next week, what features, functions, and full-on additions would Link's Awakening be able to add to be able to reduce some of that potential frustration? But before we even get into some of the ideas, what are some of yours? Go ahead and head down to the comment section even before we get started on this and leave just one idea. What can Link's Awakening do to improve on the last one or add something to give extra value to this new release? We want to be starting conversations here at fanatixfour, not just be talking at you, but like interacting and having full-on conversations. That's why I mentioned Discord early and all that kind of stuff. I'll talk about that a little bit more all the way at the end of the video. But yeah, let us know before we go into it. And that's gonna start now. This one is the talk of the town. As you may already know, Link's Awakening has actually already seen one re-release. It released on the Game Boy in 1993 and was quite well liked. The game has always been seen as quirky, partly because it features sprites that were seemingly lifted from other games, perhaps for convenience sake, and has some NPCs and enemies that are essentially Mario, Goombas, Yoshi, Kirby, and Chain Chomps. This was actually the first time I'd ever seen a Chain Chomp because I hadn't played Super Mario Bros. 3 yet, so whenever I saw it in Mario later, I was like, you guys stole that right out of Link's Awakening. which was not correct. When the game was re-released as Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color in 1998, just a month after the console's launch, it was the same exact game, only in color, and it added a whole new dungeon dubbed the Color Dungeon, as it had puzzles that were reliant on color to solve. Along these lines, adding a dungeon or two is one path the Switch remake could certainly explore. And there's some potential evidence for this. Last year we saw job listings for dungeon designers at Nintendo. As for some ideas of what this dungeon or set of dungeons could be, well, the Color Dungeon was based on a console gimmick. So I would expect the same here. If they do this, I would expect one definitely based on motion controls, even if we all kind of hate it a little bit. Probably something akin to the motion control puzzles in Breath of the Wild, although hopefully a little less frustrating. And then another example might be an HD Rumble dungeon, although this is a little dependent on whether the Switch Mini would have HD Rumble in it. Talks are that it might not, so we'll see. But these would be similar to the HD Rumble puzzles in Mario Odyssey. Alright, so as I said, your comments are meant to start conversations. So as a part of this video, I actually went back to AJ's video on Link's Awakening back in February to pull some comments that would be interesting to bring over here, just to make everybody feel more engaged and involved. We'll be probably trying to do that a little bit more for some of these kinds of topics. So here we go with this one. Nate says, I'm really hoping for some extra content. I love Link's Awakening to death, but I don't want to buy the same experience twice. I'd really like to see secret dungeons and maybe an item or two that could help, but won't be required. As we've already explored the dungeons concept, I think the items would be an awesome addition. We already know the item management will be easier in Link's Awakening Switch than it had been in the past game. Previously, you only had 2 item buttons to work with, A and B, and had to therefore go into the menu all the time to switch out what you were using. However, the Switch offers a litany of other button options. Zelda usually has items and dungeon progression tied together. So for example, the hookshot dungeon, you get the hookshot. It helps you with puzzles. In the ball and chain dungeon in Twilight Princess, you get the ball and chain. It helps you with puzzles. So if we have a motion control dungeon, then perhaps some kind of magical glove that allows you to use motion controls to control things even in the overworld. Or for the HD Rumble dungeon, perhaps a shovel. And this shovel would allow you to find items or secret rooms or dungeons in the overworld as well. Part of the benefit of this is that it could feel like all this stuff had already been there in the other game, you just didn't quite have the tools to access it at the time. And that's the kind of thing that I think allows these remakes to feel bigger and better. Similarly to how A Link Between Worlds expanded on the story and world of A Link to the Past, it would be great to see Link's Awakening do the same. Actually, even Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee did a lesser version of this themselves. Technically, you weren't playing as Red from Yellow, but rather as a player several years later. Some additions included Elite Four members showing up in the story, other characters making appearances in the overworld rather than just in their gyms, and I especially liked the story edition with your rival and his Cubone. Those help the world to feel a bit more fleshed out than the original game, but I suspect we might need a bit more than that to expand on this one. Obviously, the art style helps better express what this game is, but I'd like them to go another layer beneath what this game already was. Literally. Give us an extra through line that it takes place in additional subworlds that you could find maybe with that shovel. And this gives an aspect of the nightmare equivalent to what the dreamlike world is of Link's Awakening. Maybe there's alternate bosses that are just powered up forms of the ones that you already see in the regular game, and it can tease an additional contrast between light and dark, dream and nightmare. Lead me to believe that this world has been there all along, we just lacked the tools to find it. I think this is the kind of thing that would entice double dippers who are on the fence at the moment to actually come back. It's the Switch. This is one of its gimmicks: easy local co-op. And this would not be the first time Nintendo has done something like this. Four Swords Adventure and Triforce Heroes did the same thing, but truthfully, a traditional handheld is absolutely not the way to accommodate local multiplayer. Even if the mechanics and actual games were fun, there's much too much coordination to make it easy and accessible. It also isn't great as a forced mechanic. Though at times there were ways around it, the games were built with co-op in mind. but that's not to say it couldn't work now. The benefit of the Switch is there's always local multiplayer accessible just right there, and it's especially beneficial because this is a home console as well. The game should still be designed for just one player, but if a second player drops in as well, then all of a sudden there's just a couple more enemies, or the enemies take just a little bit more damage. This could certainly break some puzzles, but it also could give the option of optional extra dungeons with multiplayer in mind. Truthfully, Nintendo hasn't shoehorned multiplayer into their traditionally single-player games very well in the past. Specifically, I'm thinking of Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and Mario Odyssey, or even Mario Galaxy. But I think it could work fairly well for a top-down action-adventure game along the lines of Link's Awakening. There are a lot of things that Nintendo could do to make Link's Awakening feel more worth the price tag. We just haven't seen them yet, or haven't had the opportunity. And maybe they won't be there. We'll find out. I haven't played the original in a really long time, and I'm excited to see it in this brand new environment and art style that brings the world to life in a way that it couldn't have in the past. I know no matter what, I'm excited by just the art style and quality of life's improvements that they're making, but I'm really curious to see what else they show. But that is what I think. What do you think? What would you like to see added to Link's Awakening to make it more worth your money? Or otherwise, are you already sold on the game? Let me know all that in the comments down below. And just so you know, we bring up a lot of those comments on our weekly podcast directly to you. And if you don't know about directly to you, it's our weekly podcast where we talk about gaming news, answer your questions, and also talk about some of the comments that you leave below, whether they're good or bad. And this week, we'll also be doing our E3 predictions. If you haven't done it before, click the link in the description and subscribe to Directly to You for those podcasts. But also, we're thinking about doing more content on there in the future, which brings us to subscribe to this channel also while you're here, and ring the bell for notifications. We do videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and we're really working to make sure this channel does that thing of starting the conversation, and then it's a community involvement. So also, you can go to our Discord and talk to us, and we'd just love to get this stuff started and be involved with you guys. Thanks so much for sticking with us as we go through changes and all that kind of stuff. It really means a lot. And also, look at my new background. My wife helped me do that. Isn't that sweet of her? Yeah, it is. That's all. All right, that's it for me. See you all soon. Hasta la pasta.